Alright, so I'm going to do an update on where we're at with these drives. I'm down to the last 70 gigs, and I can't figure out what's going on. The application that I've been using, Free File Sync, has been working fantastic up until this point. Um, so just so we understand, these two are in a storage pool in Windows 8, Windows 8.1 64-bit. Don't know if that really matters, but they're in a storage pool and they're equal to 2.71 terabytes. Now, these are NTFS formatted externals, just regular drives. They just recognize in Windows as regular drives, not in the storage pool, and they're 2.72. So I did the math, and there's a 10 gig difference between this pooled section of drives and one external drive, which normally wouldn't be a big deal. But because I have these drives so full of data, I think I'm at that cap of where I'm reaching it. You can see here, let me pull it up. So this is the drive that I seriously want to get all the data off of it. You see, it's 2.72. I've been manually throwing things in all these other drives that I have, just these spare drives, trying to make this less, because this is supposed to be mirrored into this. This is the storage pool. These are those two drives. So you can see 2.71, 2.72. And like I said, it's a 10 gig difference. Right now, trying to get this to mirror this is not happening. I'm at a difference of about 90, no, actually no, it's about 90 gigs. It's almost like the free space that I've freed up is now something that needs to be synchronized over to this. And I don't recall ever running into that, where the free space is something that would be a problem. I can't find out what these differences are. I mean, at this point, I'm just so tired. It's what? 1:36 in the morning. I've been doing this for the last 3 or 4 hours straight, trying to free up some space, trying to find places on these other drives so I can dump this data back. And I just can't figure it out. The other application that I'm using, HeatSoft ADCS, it's reaching its memory maximum capacity. So when I do a comparison between these two drives, it basically just conks out and says, sorry, I don't have enough memory available to do this. So that used to be my go-to, but it's not working. So Free File Sync has been, my workhorse lately. But even now, I don't understand the results. It seems like there's more data on this drive. Well, let me go back a little bit. So when I had these drives up and I started the synchronization, it was straight. I mean, this was an empty drive, and all I wanted to do was dump everything from here to here. And you can see that there was still some room. I still had about 30 gigs left, and I thought, okay, well, I should still be able to get that in here. As soon as I started synchronizing, when I got to about 78%, there's about 500 gigs left, and Free File Sync just closed. It was running for almost 2 solid days, and then it just closed out. And ever since then, the system's been acting a little strange. When I do the manual, I go folder to folder comparing to see where it fell off. I mean, obviously, I could do a full sync and check all the folders independently, but I like to do it manually sometimes just to see where I'm at. And when I do that and I find folders that are different and I go to synchronize them, there's a pause, and I don't know why there's a pause. Could it be that this drive is failing? Oh, enjoy the fan there, because obviously when I go through these large file transfers, these drives do get hot. But anyway, the drives, they stop, and the transfer stops, and you'll sit there and you'll watch the application, and sometimes it'll say not responding. And I don't know if it's an issue of read. There's a read problem with the source drives, or there's an issue, or I could say a bottleneck in the mirroring on these drives. So if I start copying over, let's say, 7 gigs, I'll start copying 7 gigs at 80, 90, 100 megabytes per second, and it may stop. And then we'll sit there. And, you know, Windows is still responsive. The windows are still responsive, but nothing's happening. And then after a little while, then it picks back up again. So I don't know if it's a copy error because the software I'm using doesn't say it's a copy error. Maybe it's able to pull the data. Maybe it's hitting these bad blocks and is able to pull the data off the bad blocks. And maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But anyway, I'm at the last couple of gigs. And I don't understand why I can't just do a straight mirror from that P drive over to the Z drive. I've been battling this, and I really don't want to do this, but this is my last alternative because it'll show me all the individual actions, is to use SyncToy. SyncToy works fantastic on folders that really don't have too much data. When I say too much, I mean terabytes. When you're dealing with a couple gigs here and there, maybe even 100 gigs or so, it does fine. It goes through its thing and it gives you a nice little list of all the actions that need to be performed, and then you can choose what you want to do. I mean, it's not a very robust application, but it works. And sometimes it's a benefit because it'll access folders that usually give me permission errors. So the only downside to this is that it's, of all the software I've used for this project, it's so slow. Like you'll see, this has been running now, and of course there's no timer. This is running for about at least 10 minutes. Free file sync takes about 10 or so minutes to compare all the actions between these two drives, or these two sets. This, I have had it run all night, and it's still comparing. So I'm going to let it do its thing. I have a lot of stuff in a lot of places. Some of the things I got to look out for is, because this is a scavenger hunt trying to get my data back, you know, anything in the recycle bin is fair game. So I have to synchronize the recycle bins too. But the Windows still looks at them as viable storage places for deleted files. So I have to be careful, because if I try to run CCleaner or any cleanup utility that looks at the recycle bin, Windows still recognizes all these drives with recycle bins, and it goes through and it tries to empty them out. So I want to keep it as much of a mirror as possible, so that when I go through, then I can it's easier to sort. If I start going through and changing folder names, I have to make sure I replicate those changes on the source and the destination, because if I don't, then the software sees two different folders, and then I'll run into just double backing up. So I tried a while ago to make a folder called Recycle Bin Items, and that worked for a while. It was a little tricky because sometimes the data that was on there really reflected data that was on another drive. It's the way that Windows links the recycle bins. So, you know, one drive may have all this data that I just deleted showing up in the recycle bin, but but the data is actually on another drive. It's kind of weird. I don't know. Maybe I'm perceiving this wrong, but whatever. Anyway, so I really wanted to get this done. I wanted to get these drives packed up and sent back to Seagate because I am so done with these. But I can't right now until I get these last 60 gigs over. And like I said, I don't know why there's a difference, even though there's a difference of, well, that would make sense. 2.71 and 2.72. Let's see, that would be 2,710 megabytes. Is that right? Oh gosh, I'm so tired. Anyway, I'm just gonna let this run. I'm gonna see what happens, and then after it's done. Oh, and the other thing too is what really scares me is we're right down to the the last couple gigs, right? And the system is starting to act quirky. You know, this system has been rock solid stable all the year or so that I've had it online. I built it about a year ago, and it works great. Now, what I didn't have in it, and you can see in there, is all these drives. It's always had just the SSD, So it always boots up fine and it works fine. When I ran into this project and I started adding all these drives to it, man, it just started acting all kinds of weird. So I managed to run a few things on the system, and it's much more stable now. And it works. You know, I have a 400 gig hard drive in there that for a while, man, I couldn't do anything with the system and that attached. I'd have to disconnect it because it just wouldn't finish booting. It'd get to Windows, it'd get to the desktop, but it wouldn't load my icons. And I don't know what it was. I pulled the drive out, I ran some utilities on it, checked for bad sectors, checked the smart status. Drive is fine. I plug it back into the system, it just didn't like it. You know, AHCI is enabled for Saga on the motherboard, and all the other drives work fine. It's just that 400 gig. So after I formatted it for the third time, I think it was, it's been working great. So now it's been my go-to drive because it's actually the largest. I do have this 500 gig and this 1 terabyte, but they're almost full, so they're almost useless. They're only like 10-20 gigs free each. So anyway, it's been acting flaky. What happens when that happens is the software that I use for synchronization and comparison starts to bog down. I'll get a lot of not respondings, and then it comes back, and then all of a sudden the applications close, or they just hang, and I have to manually close them, open them back up. And that scares me because that's the exact same thing that happened when the first set of these drives failed. And it got to the point where my read speeds were so slow that I couldn't use it. You know, I would leave it for hours and hours and hours and hours, and it would only copy a couple hundred megs, you know, maybe a couple gigs. So our throughput is still pretty good. We kind of plateau at 30 megabytes per second in some cases. So I think we're still okay there. I'm keeping this fan on it just to make sure that heat, basically keep it alive as long as possible. But like I said, I'm just down to these last couple gigs. So we'll let this run tonight. I'll pick it up in the morning and see where we're at.